Hi! Today I'm trying something new. I have a story to tell. But first, I need to go to a more appropriate location. This is a better location. So today I want to tell the story of the Model House project. It's something I've kind of told in bits and pieces, but I've never really gone through all the context and the whole history. And I've gotten a couple questions over the years, so I know it's something people are kind of interested in. Also, this is a totally new format, a new way of doing things, so if this is not something people are into, I may not make another one of these sorts of things. We'll see. Anyway, let's get started here. So, I've dropped this hint throughout the project, but this model that I've built is based off of my grandparents' house. And why that house? Well, it's important to understand a little bit about my grandparents' history. So they both were kind of technical people in their heyday, and in fact, they both went to drafting school, which was, during the time they were alive, something that was a really important skill to have if you were going into engineering. My grandmother was the only woman in her class, and my grandfather and grandmother met in that class. After they both got their drafting certificate after graduating, my grandfather went and worked for the government doing cartography, and that was a big passion of his, like looking at maps, understanding all that stuff. I mean, it's something really that's in the family. I'm into maps too. But they were once they got a little bit older, and they were kind of getting closer to retirement age, they wanted to get out of, like, the D.C. area where they were. They were in the D.C. Beltway, and it was kind of just a little bit of suburban hell, is what I get the idea of. So they decided they wanted to go out into the country, and they didn't just want to, like, buy a house. They wanted to make something. They wanted to put their mark on some land. They weren't super wealthy either, so I would imagine that, like, buying something fancy probably wasn't something that was within their financial means, which that makes sense too. But either way, they found some land, and they bought some plans from like a magazine. Back then there were like magazines you could look through and find house plans and buy them if you wanted to make your own house, I was told. So I got these plans, and they started drafting on top of them and making changes and adjusting it, and eventually got all their changes certified and were ready to break ground, and they just started going. So it took them a bunch of years, but eventually they had a house that they largely built themselves. They did most of the work with their hands, and they hired a couple contractors to do some jobs, and also here and there some friends would come over and help them too. But like, that to me was always super impressive. The fact they pretty much just built a house all on their own, or mostly on their own. Anyway, this is kind of where I enter the story. That's sort of the background of the house itself, but let me explain kind of my interest in the house. So I would come and visit my grandparents throughout my life, like once or twice a year. It was a decently long drive away, so it wasn't something we do like super regularly. But the other, my grandfather died when I was relatively young, so I never really knew him all that well. But for me, it was something where it was the history of the house was always kind of interesting, or always like pushed onto me. When I was there, I would always stay in the basement, and I'll actually overlay over here me pointing at where I would stay in the house in my model. It's in the corner of a little tiny room in the basement. We'd call that the apartment. And there'd be a bed in there. I would lay down. I'd sleep there. And sometimes when I'd be going to bed, I'd be looking around, just being observant, looking at what was around me. And one time I noticed, oh, there's this nice little drawing on the wall. What's this? And my grandmother said, oh, it's the plans for the house. And I got the whole spiel on what they were about and stuff like that. And I always thought, oh, that's really neat. And for the next couple years, every single time I'd go, I'd stay in that basement room and I'd look at the plans, and it was always just a really interesting thing for me to look at. A few years back, though, when I was staying there, I actually asked if I could make some copies of them. I thought they'd be really nice to hang up in my apartment. Make cool wall art or something like that. I thought it would be cool for when people came over, they'd ask what they are, and I could tell the whole story, and it's just something I was kind of proud of. So I got some photocopies made, and I brought those back with me, and they were kind of just sitting in my apartment for probably a good couple years, just with me just waiting to hang them up or do something with them. And then kind of something changed things a little bit. So in the spring of 2018, my grandmother passed away. And when she passed away, I kind of wanted to... we started going through the things in our house and through our estate and figuring out what everyone was going to take and how we were going to divvy things up. And I came across these plans again, and I thought, these things are too cool to just sit here and do nothing with. So I wasn't unfortunately able to take the originals. Those are still at the house. But I did have my photocopy. So when I got back, I started thinking, what could I do with these plans? I mean, I could hang them up, sure, but I kind of want to do something more than that. I'm probably not going to be coming back to this house very often, and I want to have something I can kind of use to remember the house by. So I took these plans, and I was looking at them, and a thought came into my head, what if I tried to build these, like on a small scale? That's kind of an interesting idea. I mulled it over, and I started thinking about how I'd go about doing it. And as I thought more and more, I thought, this is really a doable thing I could do, like a project I could do. So a couple months later, at the beginning of 2019, I posted the first video, and I started working on this model. So it was kind of quick, but that's kind of the story behind it. It was my grandmother passing away kind of kicked off the project for me. So anyway, that's about all I wanted to say on this. Like I said at the beginning, if you like this sort of format or have more questions for me or more questions about the house, leave them in the comments below. Maybe I'll do another one of these sometime. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.